And so, what's like your process kind of for making an Instagram post? Because I feel like there's a misconception where people think it's easy. Like, how long does it take you from when you have an idea or you find a recipe you want to make all the way to the point where you post? Like, how long does that take, and what's that process like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I I definitely plan out my content ahead of time, but I always leave flexibility because I think there's really something to be said for sharing things as close to real time as possible. Um, but obviously, with sponsored content and things like that, it's something that needs to be planned more in advance. So if there's, let's say, a recipe, for example, typically there's, depending on whether it is a sponsored post or not, there can be anywhere between a couple of days to 2 weeks of kind of scheduling that out. Um, but then, like I said, within that, within a week, I try to include at least 3 or 4 posts that are pretty real time, that I either took the photo that day or the day before, and just trying to keep it as real as possible. But yeah, like I said, and I'm sure I'm sure you'll probably ask, your next question will be about this, but the sponsored content definitely makes for more of, having to schedule things out ahead of time.
Yeah. So, do you remember your first sponsored post and like how that came about?
I could not tell you if I tried going back, I had them on Girl Meets Life and they were just blog posts. My first sponsored post on Instagram, gosh, I actually have no idea. That's a really good question. It makes me, I'll want to go back and look. I don't remember.
Yeah. Do you have like what are some of the like highlights, like the top companies you've worked with so far?
Yeah, I've loved working with Whole Foods because that was just a super organic collab. Let's see, who else? I partnered with Adidas. Um, Definitely brands that I already have loved and used are obviously my favorite ones to work with. And also, I love partnerships that are ongoing. So, not just like one off things, but, we've really loved working together. So, we continue it. I also love working with brands that I didn't use previously and I give them a try and I end up really loving it. So, for example, right now I'm working with a brand called Detox Organics. It's a kind of like a superfood chocolate powder. And I've been making the shakes in the morning, and this is not a plug. I mean, it is a plug for them, but this is not part of my campaign with them. But I genuinely, I started using the product, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've never liked having shakes in the past, and so the fact that I actually am enjoying this, I'm feeling great. It was really cool that I was introduced to this product to potentially work with them, and I ended up loving it and really incorporating it in my own life. And so I love that, and I really try to make that the case with every brand that I work with because, like I said before, it's so important for me to be transparent and authentic. And yes, I'm getting paid for some of this content, but it's still authentic and it's still products that I love and truly stand behind. So that's something I really, really make a point to stick to.
And then, so how do these brand deals come about? Do you reach out to companies or do they reach out to you? Is it a bit of both? Like, what's it look like?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I I get reached out to by brands pretty often. They email me, they DM me. We come up with some sort of collaboration option, and it really varies depending on the brand. I love to work with brands and really have a conversation. And a lot of times they approach me with a specific campaign, but I it's so important for me to tie in my Hungry Blonde authenticity and share my story. And so even if they have a very specific campaign, I'll often say, hey, I love this idea. Like there might be a couple of tweaks that I would like to make to just make sure that this stays true and organic to the story that I'm trying to tell. And I find that really has worked well and helps actually build the relationship even stronger with those brands. I also reach out to brands pretty frequently. I'll shoot them a DM and just be like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I just shared your product in my Instagram story. I love it. I use your product all the time. Like, let me know if you have any, collaboration partnerships coming up that we can work on together. Yeah, so I would definitely say it's like a balance of the two.
Hmm. And do companies usually go for it when you've posted like their product already on your Instagram story, or do they kind of look at it as like once you've posted, it's like, oh, they're already promoting it, we don't need to collaborate because they're already doing it, or do they usually go for it when you like have posted the product already?
I've had both happen. I've had brands, a lot of brands still are kind of in startup mode and they just don't have a budget for it. And so I totally understand. I have very much made it a point to remove the stigma of sponsored content, both with the brands and with my followers. It's like my whole thing is this is the world we live in now. I have my platform. Like, how can we team up in ways that are mutually beneficial? So if I reach out to a brand and like I have no problem posting about brands on my stories that I'm not working with because I'm happy to help them grow. And like if they have the budget, I'm sure they would want to work together. And a lot of times they do. But if not, like going back to being authentic with my followers too, like I'm not going to not post about a product just because they're not paying me. Like that would just be stupid. So I definitely am, finding the balance between that.
Yeah, and then so kind of doubling back to where you were saying how it's better when brands kind of give you a little creative freedom, so it's beneficial for both parties. What are some other like best practices for brands when they're collaborating with creators like yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would definitely say that giving creative freedom is the absolute most important thing. I obviously know that they're looking for certain key messaging and stuff like that, so I understand that. But I think that um, you know, having a conversation with an influencer or a brand is, I think, something that is not done as much as it should be. Even getting on the phone. Like I love having a phone call with somebody at the company or brand that I'm working with, and like hearing somebody's voice can really make such a huge difference and forming a relationship with that person. So I think that that's like a really great first step. Let me think what else. I would also say for brands to really, as they're shaping these campaigns, um, looking for influencers that have a very unique voice and not necessarily looking at just their numbers. Because I follow certain influencers that have, maybe 10,000 followers or even less, but they have some of the most loyal followers and great engagement that I've ever seen. And I do think that brands are starting to notice that, but I think that it's definitely of value to look for maybe these micro influencers. I mean, I would consider myself a micro influencer, but even smaller that have these connections with their followers that are really valuable.